Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 253 of the On Air Advocate. Where at the On Air Advocate, we look to provide education, support, and empowerment for all of those with different abilities, mental and medical illnesses, and their caregivers. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Tammy Flynn, and I am the host and producer of the On Air Advocate. And I am super excited if you are here this Wednesday morning joining us, or whether you are catching this on the replay. Now, as always, if you think any of the content that we are talking about today could be helpful or relevant for anyone in your circle, please hit the share button and share the love with others. Well, if you guys have been following us this month over here at the On Air Advocate, you know that we are celebrating Marfan Awareness Month, and we are in our Marfan Awareness Series. And I'm so excited to welcome with us today Maya Brown-Zimmerman. She is the advisor to the Marfan Foundation's Professional Advisory Board. So welcome, Maya.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes, so excited. This is our next in the series. I know last week we really focused on getting to know Marfan, and today we're going to be talking more about the connecting within our community. But before that, Maya, this is the first time you've ever been on the show. I would love for you to share with the audience just a little bit about your background. How did you get involved with the Marfan Foundation and all of that?
Okay. So I'm a Marfan patient myself. I was diagnosed when I was 8. And for the first few years, was not involved with any group, didn't know anybody else who had Marfan. And as I entered the teen years, my mom noticed that I was getting pretty resentful and angry about my diagnosis and the differences that I had between my peers. Mm-hmm. And so she recommended that I reach out to my doctor and ask if he had any other patients. And it just so happened that there was a network group affiliated with the Marfan Foundation in the next city over. And so a genetic counselor connected me with them. And I started going to the meetings and made a friend there. And then that got me involved with the National Foundation and with advocacy. So I started giving talks and writing articles when I was 14.
Wow.
And I've been with them ever since.
Wow. And I know that there are all different resources and ways now, probably easier than back then, that teens and, those that are diagnosed and stuff can get involved. But, from that experience leading you into the importance of creating connections within your community, what are the best ways do you feel like, with Marfan that, the community can do that?
We have a lot of ways to connect. It definitely is very different from the mid-1990s when I was looking for something. The Marfan Foundation is a great resource to reach out to. They're at marfan.org. We have a teen program for kids that are 13 to 18. I actually used to help run that. We have local community groups all across the country. We have a family camp. We have a summer camp just for kids ages 7 to 17. We have our annual family conference that changes locations in the U.S. every year, and that's like my very favorite. And then I admin a Facebook group separate from the foundation called Marfan Syndrome, and we have over 13,000 members from around the world that have Marfan Syndrome and their unaffected family members, and then some related condition patients as well, like Loeys-Dietz syndrome and VEDS.
And within that group, because I know that during the pandemic now and COVID, there's been so many conferences and things that have either been put on hold or changed to virtual. Have you guys kind of stepped into that space where some of, the like a virtual camp or virtual conference, have you guys changed those things over at all during this time?
Yes, we had a virtual conference last summer that was international. So we had workshops in 5 or 6 languages. Doctors from Europe participated. It was really fantastic, just the amount of information that we had access to. The teen program is virtual too, and so they have meetings every other week online. And then I think online support groups like on Facebook have become even more important because we don't have the opportunity to get together in person.
Yes. And I'm certain through those kinds of groups, like through that Facebook group, there have been kind of like you were connected by your genetic counselor, right? Way back when, that now people are able to be connected that way when they meet each other, find out the city or, where they live that's possibly similar.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that find the Facebook group before they find the organization, just by doing their searches. And then through there, they're able to connect with people in their area. We obviously refer them to the Marfan Foundation to get other resources as well. But it's much easier for people to connect now.
Yes. And I know that, before the show, we were briefly, chatting about having that connection with people that have the similar experiences as you is so important. And so those within that rare disease community, caregivers and people that are supporting for, yourself, I know that there are many other things that you do to kind of reach out. You write a blog and that kind of stuff, for yourself. What do you, how heavy do you weigh on making sure people get involved in community, that they get involved in connecting with others, and the importance of that?
I think that it is vital to have that opportunity. And I'm the parent of a child with Marfan, and then a couple of my other kids have different disabilities as well. And so I look at it from both the parent perspective and the patient perspective. And although my mom pushed me to get involved, as a 13-year-old, my parents were also really apprehensive about being involved in the community. And my dad took me to my first community group meeting, and he sat me in the parking lot and he said, "Are you sure you want to go in? Because people, they're going to look different." And he used the word, they might have some deformities. And he was really scared about me seeing what the future might look like for myself. As a person that had a physical disability himself, and thinking about his lack of connection to community growing up, the idea of connecting was scary to him. And it was scary to my parents that I might identify as having a disability, identify as being sick. And in their mind, that was really negative. And I looked at my dad and I said, the people in that room are going to look like me. And that's why I want to be there. And so we went in. It was mostly adults. There was another girl my age who I bonded with immediately. And it was so helpful for me to see people of all ages that were living well. And that didn't mean that nothing bad happened to them. It didn't mean that they didn't have surgeries or struggles, but I was able to see how they handled those things. And I could imagine myself as an adult, which before I'd met adults who were affected, I couldn't do that. And so I did become really involved in the community, and it made my parents nervous because there's loss. The girl my age passed away a few months later from a dissection. And I've lost a lot of friends over the years. My son, who's 10, has dealt with loss in the community from a young age. And they wanted to shield me from that. And I see other parents who are reticent. But it is so important to be exposed to it all. And I would choose a million times over getting involved when I did, because it gave me coping skills. It helped me not feel alone. And I think my life is much more full for being able to identify as a Marf, as we call ourselves, because it is part of me. I have a lot of identities, and being a rare disease patient, having disability is one of those identities.
Right.
And it's not a shock to any of us as kids that we're different from other people. I mean, I could tell I was 6 feet tall at 13. But there's so much value in connecting and seeing that you're not alone.
Yes. And as a mom, a mom that also has kids that have, different abilities, special needs, all of that. I don't know their ages, but what are the things you get them involved in that you're encouraging them to do, that maybe your parents didn't?
One is the annual conference, and we're very lucky that we've been able to go just about every year. And so my 10-year-old with Marfan has never known a time when he wasn't around other people at least once a year that were affected. And so he has friends that he sees at conference every year. And he has leg braces and he uses a wheelchair sometimes, and he doesn't know anybody here who does, but he goes to conference and, he can see my friend Karen and they can compare their AFOs, or he can go with some of the other kids and they're zipping off in their chairs and his is blue and theirs are pink and red. And so that's been helpful. I have a child who's 10 who we're starting to get connected with other kids that have his disability. And we'll do that in the future with my 5-year-old as well, when she's a little bit older. So, I take their lead, and I tell Julian, my 10-year-old, that he's going to have to decide how involved in the community he wants to be and how Marfan plays into his identity. But I want to give him the opportunities now so that he can decide how involved he wants to be later.
Yes. And with that, connection, obviously parents that go in with their kids and they just get the diagnosis, right? It's kind of like what to do after the diagnosis, who to get connected with. And the Marfan Foundation seems like it has so many different layers of kind of like your starting point, right? If you get diagnosed, this is a great way to start. As a parent, what would you encourage kind of those first thoughts or words to be to your children, if you get that diagnosis? Would you say that starting point would be them really understanding what Marfan is? Would you say them learning it through getting involved, in a group a little bit more? Because obviously there's a lot of complexities, whatever that word would be. I can't even say it this morning. It's complex, to be explaining it, especially if our, kiddos, if they're getting diagnosed at the age of, 5 or 10, 12, much easier, obviously, if you're an adult to take all that in. Right?
I tell people it's not one conversation, it's a series of conversations, and you give a little bit of information each time, and you take your kid's lead, and so you answer their questions, and you always have to be honest. Whether the answer is, I don't know, or, my son's asked, well, am I going to have surgeries? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when, and we're going to do things to, take care of you to put that off as long as possible. But it might happen. I've had a bunch. But, it's why you take your medication. And so from a young age, first we talked about the medicine. This is a medicine that makes your heart strong. And this is the medicine that keeps your lungs strong. And then from there, kind of built onto it. But the foundation has a book online, Marfan A to Z, that's great for young kids. It's a PDF that you can download. There's Marfan is Not Martian, that was written by a teenager with Marfan. That's great for like the 8 to 12 range. That's also available for download. So those are really great at opening that conversation. We have a nurse that you can talk to about medical questions. And then there's a social worker that can help you, talk about your specific situation and work out the best way to talk to your child. We also have a mentorship program. So if you want to talk to another mom or dad, who's been there and how they handle those conversations, you can request a mentor. And I think that's a really valuable way as well.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about that, especially for parents, because I think that, being thrusted into this as well, I'm saying, you're at that same point where you're like, oh, well, this is a diagnosis. Well, now as a parent, what am I supposed to do or feel, and being connected to other parents that have traveled that journey. So important.
What to expect when you're expecting doesn't talk about, what to expect when your kid gets diagnosed with a rare disorder. And so there's not a handbook other than getting connected and talking with other families. And it's a big learning curve for parents too. And I tell them that, but in a couple of years, you're going to look back and you're going to be the one who's helping other parents walk through this. You have the skills, and we're going to help you to be able to learn what you need to learn and to handle this, because now you're in the Mar family, and it's going to be okay. Okay is going to look different. It's going to be a different world than what you anticipated, but it's going to be okay.
And so for the parents, there's that kind of, mentorship together that, they can get involved with. Is there a separate Facebook page or support group, or maybe some webinars of just support for just the parents?
All of that. There are monthly phone support groups.
Okay.
And they have one for parents of affected kids, and they're getting ready to introduce some new ones. We have some great webinars and some short Q&A videos that have been done by other parents in the community. You know, how to deal with school issues like IEPs and 504s. How do you talk to your kid about this? How do you handle this with the doctor? So the videos, you know, from a few minutes to like an hour. There's a Facebook group for Marfan Moms that another mom runs. That's really great. I think if you search Marfan Mamas, you'll be able to find it. So, and then, you know, connections on a community level when we don't have COVID, we can get together
in person. And so for 2021, how is the conference and those things scheduled? Is it scheduled in person as of right now still, or are we still going virtual for 2021?
2021 is going to be virtual.
Okay.
But we're already getting family camp and summer camps on the schedule for 2022. And the 2022 annual conference is going to be in LA at Hoag Hospital. So we are very excited after 2 years off. It's going to be a big party.
It's going to be awesome. And, you know, and I know so much of the time when we have things in our life that possibly drive, you know, pain, it also kind of leads us to purpose. And so, you know, when we talk about getting involved with the, you know, the Marfan Foundation, as you sit on the advisory board and getting to that point, if there are people watching today or possibly listening to the podcast that are like, you know, my child has this, I so much more want to get involved and actually, you know, be more of a powerful figure in, you know, spreading the word and spreading awareness, making decisions, things like that, what would be their steps of getting involved?
Contact the foundation. You know, go to marfan.org and fill out the contact page. It's at marfan.org/secure/ask, or call the foundation at 1-800-8-MARFAN and say, I want to get involved. What can I do? Because we have so many opportunities. There's fundraising, there's support opportunities, community groups, writing, you know, blog posts for their blog. They'll find some way to put you to use. There's something for everybody to help out with.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it sounds like really, you know, creating these connections in the Marfan community, the Marfan Foundation has made this so simple, in the sense that it's kind of like a one-stop shop, in the sense that if you get that diagnosis, everything from the nursing stuff to more diving into support groups to teens getting involved, that they really have so many things under their umbrella.
I really appreciate that they understand how vital it is to be able to connect as a community, and that they are always looking for other ways to build those connections, especially now as we're having to be virtual for a while. You know, reaching out to the community and saying, okay, what can we do to serve the needs that you're looking for? And I think that this year's virtual conference is going to be different from last year's. Last year was a lot of information. This year, I think we're looking at how can we continue those connections, because the in-person conference, half of it is about just being together. And then, you know, there are the medical workshops. So they're understanding that it's very important for us, and particularly now.
And in wrap up, for yourself who has Marfan, having children that have this, aside from the Marfan Foundation, do you feel like there should be any other super important resources in your Rolodex?
I think seeing what other programs or connections your hospital might have can be really valuable.
Community.
But for me, it's been primarily the Marfan Foundation and building off the programs there. And my involvement there has made me a more educated patient. It's made me more confident in my abilities and my future. And really, I think it's ultimately what gave me the confidence to be a mother, knowing, you know, what the future can look like and where it's headed in terms of research and all of that too.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, it does seem like the Marfan Foundation has every layer needed, but I do think great within your community to be touching base with your hospital as well. And I know that I believe when I spoke to the doctor last week, we just talked about, where to find those resources for the best doctors that know the most about Marfan, because that's a whole nother thing, right?
Right. You have to make sure that you're getting accurate information. And depending on where you're at, your doctor may not have ever seen another Marfan patient before. So the Marfan Foundation has a clinic directory that you can download from their website under the patient resources section. And that's invaluable. We have some local care. We travel for some care. We've kind of put things together because getting accurate care as early as possible makes a big difference long term. And I can see that my son is living a very different life than I was at his age, both medically and then socially from the connections that he's making.
Yes. But I can't speak to that enough. I thought that was just so, it's such a valuable resource to be able to find out if the state you're living in, the doctors there really have the latest in research and information. And so having that directory, knowing that.
And if they don't, the foundation can empower you to help bring your hospital up to speed. There are volunteers that have really taken a lead in creating clinics in their area. So there's a lot of options.
So many things. So in closing, where would be the easiest way for people to get connected with like the Facebook group and the parent groups and the teen things? Would it just be going to marfan.org?
For anything that's related to the foundation, just go to marfan.org.
Okay.
And reach out to them. For the Facebook groups, if you just type in Marfan syndrome in your Facebook search bar, my group is called Marfan syndrome, but you'll find a whole bunch of others there too.
Okay. And getting connected, we know through those groups, social media isn't always the best for everything, but when it comes to these groups and really connecting people from all over the world, that can lend other information. They're such a great resource.
Yeah, I think it can be really valuable.
Yeah, for community. Well, thank you so much, Maya, for taking this time to share more with us about creating community connections with Marfan here at the On Air Advocate this morning. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and thank you all for watching this morning. If you guys would like to know any more about the Marfan Foundation, just head on over to marfan.org. Or if you'd like to know more about the On Air Advocate and the services that we offer here, you can head on over to onairadvocate.com. With that, everybody have a wonderful Wednesday. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.